everyone, and welcome to Real Property Pros and Cons, episode 14. And, normally I'm pretty sure you've seen me do a bunch of like news related stuff and news related articles, and I talk about news. And I decided that I kind of don't want to do that anymore. So now I'm not going to talk about news, and I'm just going to talk about random stuff for about, 5-ish minutes while my guest kind of stands in the green room or sits in the green room and listens to me chat, being like, what is this guy talking about? But yeah, I often get people who either call me or talk to me in the real estate space, and they're like, I want to get an LLC, or I want to make sure that if this person sues me, they can't get my house, or I want to make sure that a tenant can't go after my personal residence if somebody dies on the property because I was negligent. And a lot of times I'm like, well, what you can do is you can put it in an LLC, you can put it in a trust. There's also, or you can get insurance. There's all kinds of different ways of doing that. And I advise my clients on sort of how to protect their assets. At the same time, this is not really a show where I am advising anybody. And also, this is not a show with legal advice or anything like that. And I feel like you're far more interested in listening to a guest talk about something they're really passionate about and really care about, as opposed to listening to me talk about something that I do as a job. So I kind of went through my Rolodex, not literally a Rolodex, because those are like from a really long time ago. And I actually owned one when I had a lot of business cards, which was a couple of years ago. But now I don't have business cards. I have digital business cards. So I went through my Rolodex, which is I flipped through my phone contacts, and I was like, who is a person who has a ton of experience in business law, knows a lot about LLCs and insurance and all of the wonderful things that people have to do to protect their assets. And as I was scrolling through, I found the perfect guest. And I was like, hey, this is somebody who's really fun to talk to, knows what they're talking about, and also, has made some interesting personal life choices around business and really kind of knows how to make these kinds of business decisions in a way that's interesting, fun to talk to, and also can be elucidating for a lot of people, or elucidating, enlightening, helpful, any of those words for a lot of people. And I said, I'm going to bring her on the show, and I'm going to have her come and talk to us about all the different ways that you can protect your assets, real property and otherwise. And that'll take up, way more than an hour, but we can certainly talk about it in an hour. And it'll be a fun conversation. And also, fun fact, when I first started a podcast, when I first started, doing YouTube streaming, whatever, when the pandemic started, she was the first guest, and I was completely terrified. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. And she was just like, look, turn on your camera, start streaming, start talking, it'll be fine. And now, well over a year and a half later, I'm still doing it. And so I thought, what better person to come back on the show and talk to us about it? So that is our guest for today. And she will be with us when we come back. All right, everyone. I would like to introduce you to Alanna Pearl. Alanna Pearl's business and estate planning practice focuses on helping individuals and small business owners enhance their lives today and secure their futures tomorrow. She excels in guiding her clients through the often confusing maze of personal and legal decisions to ensure the well-being of their families and businesses and assist in the accomplishment of cherished goals. Alanna graduated in the top 10% of her law school class from the University of San Diego in, I won't say when, and began her legal career in business litigation, working with several prestigious boutique law firms in San Diego. There are a lot of them here. And although Alanna was a successful litigation attorney, she ultimately became disillusioned with what she was seeing. She wanted to serve as a counselor and advisor for her clients in the true sense of the word. She wanted to guide them to make strategic decisions in business and life and serve as their trusted advisor and lifetime lawyer. So, for this reason, Alanna founded Conscious Legal in 2018. It is an estate planning and business law firm serving small business owners and families throughout California. Alanna and her business's mission is to use her top notch legal and counseling skills to empower her clients, helping them to plan property and create a firm foundation, plan properly and create a firm foundation to reach higher ground. As part of her business law and estate planning practice, Alanna is committed to educating her community on issues related to family asset protection, kid protection planning, and the legal, insurance, financial, and tax, also known as LIFT, issues related to running a small business. Originally from New Jersey, Alanna made the incredibly wise, very, very wise decision to relocate to San Diego in 2004. And she is an avid skier and a music lover. And guess what? San Diego is a place where you can do both of those things. So I want to thank you so much for being a guest on our show, Alanna. You are awesome and amazing, and you always are incredibly insightful. And I just want to thank you for being here and being willing to talk to us.
Well, thank you so much for that very warm introduction, Franz. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Also, I got to ask, and we actually asked this when we were in the green room, but I'm going to ask this live. Is that a background or is that where you really are?
This is where I really am. I'm currently in Seattle for a temporary stay up here for the summer. My first time spending time in the Pacific Northwest. So that's actually downtown Seattle behind me.
Okay. Yes. Well, that is amazing. And if you told somebody, "Hey, that's actually my green screen or virtual background," I don't think anybody would say, "That's not a virtual background." So awesome.
Yeah, pretty nice view back
there. It's amazing. So, when we talk about LLCs specifically, and because LLCs are kind of a business staple and also business entities, how do they serve in protecting people who own real property? And would you advise people to form an LLC if they own any type of property? And before you answer that question, I'm just going to give a generalized disclaimer that applies to the rest of the show, which is anything that we say on here is not legal advice. It is legal information. And if you think you actually have a legal problem, you need to call a lawyer and pay them and get a, retainer representation agreement so they're actually representing your interests, as opposed to talking in very specific, in very general generalities about a very broad topic that could have very serious implications if your interpretation of what they say is wrong.
Yes, that's correct. This is for education and information purposes only.
Yes.
And I think I forgot the question already. So what was the question before the disclaimer?
I said, when people own property, would you actually, in a general sense, do you think that people should own property as entities as opposed to individuals?
Okay. So generally speaking, I do advise people who are investing in real estate to take title and own their real estate investments through an LLC. And the reason for that is you can consider an LLC sort of like a bubble around your property. So if you put your investment property into an LLC, it's within that bubble. So anything that happens with respect to that property is inside the bubble, and it's not going to affect any of your assets outside of the bubble. So that's really the main reason. It keeps everything contained in its own little bubble, and you can isolate one property per LLC. You can sometimes put more than one property into the same LLC. That's a business decision. There's a lot of different considerations that may go into that. But generally speaking, an LLC is one piece of the liability protection puzzle that can help to ensure that if something happens and there's a claim made against you with respect to your real estate investment, that it's contained within that bubble and it's not going to affect your personal assets outside of the bubble, which is often a big consideration.
Right. So you have an LLC, it's like a bubble, and everything inside the bubble is part of the LLC, and everything outside of the bubble is not going to be at play if somebody decides that they want your money more than you want it.
Exactly. So, and when I say it's one piece of the puzzle, really, when we're talking about the average real estate investor, the two lines of defense are LLCs, the use of the LLC format. And of course, that has to be an LLC that's properly formed and maintained. And we can talk about what that means. But that's one piece. And then another piece is, of course, good insurance. And between the two, that is really the complete package with respect to the first line of defense for protecting yourself and protecting your assets.
So that makes sense. So I am curious, what do you have to do to form an LLC and maintain it properly? Like, can you just go on LegalZoom?
Well, a lot of people think that's all you need to do. And the first thing that you need to do, which is really all that LegalZoom is going to do for you, is file the paperwork with the Secretary of State. Believe it or not, that's quite easy to do. And most people actually don't need something like LegalZoom. You could just go to the Secretary of State website yourself and file the paperwork. You might not fill it out properly, but you're probably not going to do any better with LegalZoom because they're not giving you any legal advice there either. So LegalZoom is going to do the formation work for you. You could also do that yourself. But really, that's only step one. When you file the paperwork with the Secretary of State, you now have a piece of paper that says you have an LLC that exists. But there are things that you need to do beyond that. And that's called properly maintaining your LLC. So in addition to forming the paperwork with or filing the paperwork with the Secretary of State, you're going to want to have an operating agreement. And that's true whether or not there's one owner of the LLC. An owner of an LLC is called a member. That's the legal term for the owner. Or if there's many owners or members. Now, it's definitely a absolute must to have a robust and customized operating agreement if you have partners in your LLC, because that operating agreement is going to dictate your rights and obligations to each other and how you're going to run this business together. So it's basically your agreement with each other about how to run the LLC. And I definitely advise anybody who's going to have partners in an LLC to have an attorney assist with the negotiation drafting of an operating agreement. But even if you're a single member LLC, meaning you're the only owner of that LLC, you still need to have an operating agreement for a lot of different reasons. It can be more simple, and oftentimes a template may suffice, although I still do recommend having an attorney at least review any operating that you get, including an operating agreement from something like LegalZoom, because if you use a template from LegalZoom or another LLC formation service, it's just that. It's just a template.
Lawyer.
Exactly, Rocket Lawyer. It's not specific to your unique circumstance, and it may be sufficient, it may not. But the only way to really know that is to have an attorney review it. And so it's definitely important to make sure you have an operating agreement. Another thing that you need is you're going to want to have a corporate record book. Now, in the old days, when you would form an LLC or a corporation, generally what you would do is you would get this very formal, old school looking corporate binder, corporate record book that would have the place where you keep your meeting minutes and the membership certificate or the stock certificate. If it's a corporation, you would keep your operating agreement in there and other corporate records. These days, one way to do that, and a much simpler way, and also a way where you're actually going to use this corporate record book, is to create a formal digital corporate record book. So that is something that I create for my clients. I'll actually create the entire corporate record book digitally. And then it's something that my client and I can share with each other and have real time access to it so that it's actually being used properly. Because my experience is that people who have the old school type of corporate record book for their LLC or corporation, they get it, it sits on a shelf, they never touch it, they never update it. And then 10 years later, it's just covered in dust and really didn't do anything for you. So I recommend maintaining corporate records digitally. The law says that there's no specific required format for the records as long as they're maintained properly. And so that can be either in hard copy or digitally. So that's another thing that you need to do. You also want to make sure that you're properly filing the annual or biannual documentation with the Secretary of State that's required to maintain the entity over the years. With a corporation, that has to be done every year. With an LLC, that has to be done every 2 years. And then anytime there is any type of update to the information. And then finally, another thing that you're really going to want to do is you're going to want to keep minutes of meetings that you have, either with each other if there's multiple members or owners, or at the very least, you want to have an annual meeting where you review everything that happened in the corporation and you formally document that through annual meeting minutes. And there's a specific format that you're going to want to keep those in. And then you update your corporate record book with those annual minutes. And the reason that it's important to do that is, there's no LLC police. There's no corporation police. So nobody's going to be checking in on you to make sure that you did this properly, unless something happens and you actually want to use the LLC for the purpose that it was formed, which is because you want to obtain the liability protection that comes with having an LLC. Or often another reason is for the tax benefits that you may be able to obtain from having an entity as opposed to operating as a sole proprietorship if it's a operational business, or just owning property outright in your name. And so if something happens and there is a claim made against you, you want to be able to show, well, I've been doing everything properly. I've been respecting the boundaries between myself and my own personal assets and activities and the assets and activities of the business. And here's all the evidence of that in my very up-to-date and organized corporate record book that has all my required documents, all my up-to-date filings with the Secretary of State, and all my meeting minutes. So those are the basic things you need to do to properly maintain your entity. You also want to make sure that you keep good accounting records, bookkeeping records, and you're going to want to keep your personal transactions and assets separate from the business assets. And so you want to make sure you have separate bank accounts, separate credit cards for your bank, for your business, separate from your own personal accounts and credit cards, and that you're keeping good records of all the transactions, all the income, all the expenses, and then the way that you've paid yourself from your business. So doing all those things is it's a lot more than just filing a piece of paper with the Secretary of State. And I can't tell you how many people come to me and they tell me that they have an LLC formed, and they're either coming to me for their estate planning or for something with respect to their business. And then all they really have is that Secretary of State document saying that they filed, but they never even filed their statement of information. So their business might even be suspended from the Secretary of State, and they might not know. Happens a lot. So I clean up a lot of LLCs. I clean up a lot of LegalZoom LLCs and get people set up properly so that the LLC is actually doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, what I'm really hearing is, which I also know as a lawyer, is that there are corporate formalities if you choose to be a corporation. And, it's kind of like almost like having a child, right? There's the, process of having a child, and then the child is born, and that's great. But if you don't take care of the child is not actually going to turn into, the child and
A functioning
adult. Yes, functioning adult that you would like children to become, right? And that is the same thing with LLCs. Like if the LLC is born and you just let it sit there, it will die just like a baby will.
Exactly right. Yes. And, if you're going to have a business or you're going to invest in property and you're going to take the step to formalize that through some sort of entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC or otherwise, you want to make sure that you're doing it right. Because why go through the expense and the time associated and pay the $800 per year that the California FTB charges for the pleasure of doing business in California, for the privilege, I should say, actually. If you're going to pay that $800 a year to have a business, might as well make sure that you're doing it right. And these things are not hard to do. They're just things that you need to know what to do. And that's really where a legal advisor comes into the picture to make sure that you're doing this properly.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and that's why legal advisors are helpful. But one of the questions that I had is you kind of said you said this sort of in passing, but I don't necessarily know if viewers know the difference. You were like, "Oh, corporation, you have to file every year. LLC, you have to file every 2 years." Is there a difference between a corporation and an LLC?
There is a difference. There are different types of legal entities, and they there may be pros or cons of both, and why you may select one or the other for whatever type of business activity that you're going to be engaging in. Now, generally speaking, the LLC is the preferred and most appropriate type of entity for owning real estate. Corporations are really more appropriate for an operational business, like a law firm or any other type of business. If you have a service-based business or you sell products, you generally want to form a corporation for that. And an LLC is really appropriate for real estate ownership because it's a pass-through entity. And what that means is that all of the income and all of the expenses are you'll account for those in the business, and then whatever your net profit is at the end of the year, you're going to essentially pass that through to you personally as the owner of the LLC, and you'll pay that on your own personal income tax return. And that is appropriate for real estate ownership. So the LLC is really the preferred method, the preferred entity type for owning real estate.
Um, so that I think is helpful, and corporations are better if you are, as you said, an operational business where you have like actual operations and you need to actually like you don't just own stuff, but you also do stuff.
Exactly. And the main reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is most people who have a corporation, if it's a small business and it's just you, or maybe you and one other person, you're going to be working for the business, right? You own it and you also operate it. And so you want to pay yourself a salary. And the corporate form is appropriate for getting paid from your business in two different ways. One way would be the salary you pay yourself as an employee of the business who's working for the business, doing things to make it run. And then the other way is through corporate distributions from the net profit of the business. And there's tax advantages that I won't get into in detail because it's not really relevant to real property ownership through an LLC. But that's really why having a corporation and then electing to tax it as what's called an S corporation. A lot of people here, I need an S corporation. I want an S corporation. There's actually no legal entity called an S corporation. There's just a corporation. But an S corporation is a tax election that you can choose to make for your corporation, or you actually can make that tax election for an LLC as well. And what it means is that either your LLC or your corporation has elected to be taxed as an S corporation. And what that means is that you would pay yourself a salary, you'd pay employment taxes on that salary, and then everything else beyond the salary that you pay yourself would be considered a corporate distribution and would be subject to less tax. And so that's the benefit of having an S corporation, an entity taxed as an S corporation when it's an operational business.
That's super helpful to know. So the other question that I have is, if somebody, let's say somebody really does not plan on becoming a real landlord, like they don't want to own buildings, they don't want to own really anything, but they just like happen to own one, like one bedroom, one bath condo that they are renting out. Would you still recommend that they go through the, I want to say trouble, but like through the process of having all of the corporate formalities to have a corporation, or would you, whether an LLC or a whatever other type of corporation, or depending on their risk tolerances, might it be okay just for them to own it in some other way?
Yeah, great question. So somebody who just has one investment property, let's use an example of somebody who maybe they bought a house and they got a regular mortgage, a residential mortgage, and then they moved out of that home. Either they bought another house or maybe doing something different, and now they're renting out that house, right? So it's not really a business for them, but they own some property that they have a tenant. It really depends on that circumstance, on the person's, like you said, their risk tolerance, as well as their personal situation with other assets. What type of property is this? What type of tenants are they going to have? And you can do the analysis of the pros and cons of forming an LLC and potentially transferring title to the property to that LLC. I see having an LLC. It's like very expensive insurance, right? Or additional insurance. It's 800. Well, I don't want to say very expensive, but it's additional expensive insurance where you're paying a minimum of $800 a year to the FTB for the privilege of having this LLC own your real estate. Now, it may be worth it. It may not. That's something that you probably want to talk to an attorney about in your personal situation. Does it make sense for you to form an LLC and transfer title to this LLC? There are some things that you need to consider before doing that. One is that if you have a mortgage on the property, most mortgages, if not all mortgages, are going to have what's called a due on sale provision in the mortgage agreement, in the
Which is
contract.
not
What that
necessarily.
says is, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, which is not necessarily that you sell the property, it's that it's transferred to somebody who's not the original mortgagor.
Exactly right. Yes. And so if you transfer title to your property to an LLC, that likely violates the terms of the due on sale provision in your mortgage. And a lot of people form LLCs and transfer title to their property to the LLC without worrying about this or ever notifying their mortgage company, and nothing happens because there's no LLC police, there's also no deed police. So there's no one necessarily that's going to track you down and say you transferred title to your LLC. But it's possible that there's lots of different ways that your mortgage company could find out. And if they do find out, they may not care and they may not do anything. Or they may care and they may call your loan and say, you violated the due on sale provision of your mortgage. You now have to pay us the entire balance of your loan. And in that circumstance, your only options really are to refinance the loan, and that may not be in your best interest if you can't get as good of an interest rate. Or oftentimes they'll say, or you can pay us this $5,000 or $10,000 LLC transfer fee. So what I tend to do when it does make sense for a client to transfer title to property that they own in their name outright to an LLC, what I will do is get in touch with the mortgage company and obtain permission ahead of time before you've made the transfer, so that you know for sure that this is going to be allowed and it's not going to cause any problems with your mortgage company. So that's one consideration. Another consideration is that in California, at least, anytime you transfer real estate, you want to think about, is this going to trigger a reassessment of the property? Because in California, property taxes are based on the value of the home, but the value for purposes of property taxes is capped at a minimal increase every year. when the property is transferred, it then gets reassessed to its current value, and the property tax annual property tax amount can go up drastically. So you want to avoid triggering a reassessment of the value of the property so that your property taxes don't go up. And if you transfer property to an LLC and you were the sole owner of the property before the transfer, and then you are the sole owner of the LLC, that is not going to trigger a reassessment. That's going to be exempt from reassessment. But people can get trapped here because, for example, let's say you're going to be working with a partner, and you were the only person on title to this property, but then you and this other person are members of the LLC. Well, now there's not the same ownership prior to the transfer and after in the same percentage amounts. And so that would trigger a reassessment. So those are considerations you want to think about before you form an LLC and transfer title. The sun is coming down behind me. I'm going to try and block it with my head. So those are things that you want to think through ahead of time. But if it does make sense, and there's not going to be a property tax reassessment, and you've gotten permission from your mortgage company, then oftentimes it does make sense, and that would be just a decision that you need to make based on your personal circumstance and with advice and guidance of your legal counsel.
Right. And also, the one thing that I have to say, because I have sort of dealt with these situations before, is a lot of times, kind of like the partner example where one person is on title and then afterwards they want to. Sometimes one way to actually do that is to have a $0 transfer between the two people so that there are two people on title and it doesn't trigger a reassessment, or it might not trigger a reassessment if done right. And then you transfer it from those two people to have the same proportionate interest in the property.
Right. Yeah. There's ways.
In the entity.
Correct. Oftentimes there are ways to accomplish the goal that would not trigger reassessment, but it just has to be done properly.
Right.
So another thing I do want to mention is that if you do take title to real property in an LLC, you personally really should never be the owner of that LLC. What the owner should be your living trust. And the reason for that is if you own the LLC, you're the member, you're the owner, and then you either become incapacitated or you pass away, then especially in the event of your death, let's talk about that, then that LLC and the property that's owned by it are going to get pulled into the probate court and have to go through a probate matter in order to ultimately get to your beneficiaries. If you haven't done any estate planning, you don't have a living trust or a will, then that would be what we call the intestate heirs, the people who the law of California says are entitled to receive your property. Or if you do have a will, but you haven't created a living trust, then whoever you've named as your beneficiaries in your will, well, they're still going to have to go through a 12 to 18 months or even longer court process. It's very expensive in order to ultimately receive your property. So the way to avoid that, really the best way to avoid that, is through setting up what we call a living trust. And this is a probate avoidance mechanism. And your living trust is really like the foundation of everything you own. So you set up your living trust, and you can think of a living trust like a box that you put all your property into during your life. So you put the ownership of your LLC that owns your real estate investments. You put title to your residential home into your trust. You put the title to your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, cryptocurrency assets, any investment accounts, any other stock that you own. Pretty much everything that you own is going to go into that box, into that living trust. And during your life, while you're alive and able, you would serve as what's called the trustee of that trust. And nothing's really going to change for all intents and purposes for your own personal day-to-day living. You're still going to be able to have full use, control, and access of everything in the box, put things in, take things out. It doesn't have a separate tax identification or have to pay separate taxes. So it's really not any hassle to you personally during your lifetime to have this living trust. But the benefit of it is that if you became incapacitated or in the event of your death, you've already named who would step into your shoes as your successor trustee to take control of everything in the box and do with it what you've said should happen. So if you're incapacitated, that would be using your property for your own benefit, likely. And in the event of your death, that would mean passing those assets either for the benefit of your children, if you have any, or whoever you said. And the beauty of doing this through a living trust is that this all happens privately in your attorney's office, outside of the court system, and can be done much more efficiently, much more affordably, and much more privately than through a probate court process. So that is really the structure that I recommend for my clients. For the average family, small business owner, real estate investor, that really is the preferred structure. You have your living trust that then owns your business interests, whether that's your S corporation if you're an entrepreneur, or your LLCs if you're a real estate investor. And that is going to make sure that everything goes the way you'd want, to the people you'd want, in the most efficient way possible.
Right. And, you know, yeah, probate is miserable. And I don't remember if we had somebody talking about it on our show yet. We definitely had somebody on our show talking about trusts a little bit, and why you want trust. But the probate process, I have not had a guest. I will bring a probate litigator on to talk about the probate litigation process, which is miserable.
Yeah,
it is.
I do probates for clients, people, not clients who have come to me ahead of time, because
Right.
I help them to avoid probate for their family. But I do, my firm does do probate for people who come to me and say, oh, my friend died, or my dad died, he didn't have a trust, and we will assist them through the probate process. I don't do probate litigation in the sense that if there's a dispute amongst beneficiaries, then I would be referring that out. But if it's just, using the probate process, everybody's, there's no disputes, we just have to follow what's required in order to transfer these assets, then I will assist with that process. But, unfortunately, it is not the favored mechanism. In the event of somebody's death, and they hadn't set up something ahead of time, there's nothing else to do other than go through the probate process. But it is very expensive. The fees are set by statute, and so and they're based on the gross value of the probate estate. And so, if you have a home in California that's worth $1 million, which is really not that inconceivable at all, with the values of real estate in California, the probate fees are going to be very expensive just to make sure that house gets to the people that you love. It's going to be, upwards of $20,000 in terms of the attorney's fees alone, just to get that house to the people that you love. So that's something that can be avoided through a little pre-planning.
And also, I mean, since you talked about that, attorneys, as I understand it, because I am one, and you are one as well, we also, get paid, and courts want to make sure that probate attorneys get paid. And if they're, the court can also just order the sale of the asset through the probate process to pay the fees that were incurred through the probate.
If there's just a home and there's no liquid assets to pay the fees and costs, well, they have to be paid one way or another. And that could be through a forced sale. That may be the only option, essentially, is a sale of the property. And just to give you an idea of what the fees are, it's 1%. I'm sorry, it's 4% of the first $100,000, and then 3% of the next $100,000. 2%. I'm saying this off the top of my head, so I could be getting this wrong, but I believe this is it. 2% of the next $200,000, and then 1% of anything over that up to like $1 million or something like that. So it's pretty expensive. It does, and that's just the attorney's fees. The executor is also entitled to that exact same amount. So, that you double that to pay the attorney and then the executor. And then there's the court filing fees, there's appraisal fees, there's fees associated with providing notice to creditors, There's a bond often required. And so it ends up being, at the end of the day, about on average 5% of the total value of the probate estate, which is a lot of money that you could avoid having your estate have to pay before the balance gets to either your children or the people you love.
Yeah. And I mean, 5% of $1 million is $50,000. And I guarantee you, unless the asset is worth a lot more than $1 million, you're not paying $50,000 for an estate planning attorney.
Yes, that's it's going to be much, much, much less than that. So,
Yeah.
most well, there's a lot of different fees out there for estate planning as well.
Yeah.
But I think your average cost, maybe you're looking somewhere between $3,000 to $6,000 for a comprehensive estate plan. That's probably going to be a pretty standard fee for something like that. And then, of course, there might be some fees with the attorney to assist with the administration once the plan is activated by virtue of the death of the person who's created it, but still not going to be anywhere near what you might expect through a full-blown probate.
Yeah. And also, since we're talking about probate and we're talking about corporations, then somebody's going to have to value, if you have like an LLC that goes through a probate process, the LLC is going to have to be valued as well through the probate, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's right. So there'd be an appraisal done that's going to cost money. That's all part of the probate process. Absolutely.
And also, it's not necessarily based on the amount of income that the LLC or corporation generates. It would be based on what it would sell for if it were sold.
Well, that would be for like a business. That's right. Yeah, there's lots of different methods that business appraisers use to value a business. And you're right. It's not necessarily just going to be the income of the business. It's going to be whatever valuation method is used. For real property, there's whatever methods that real property appraisers use to appraise property. But yeah, that would be something that would have to be done through the probate process to appraise the value of a business or of real estate.
Right. And I guarantee you, because I've known people who've gone through probate, the value is always much higher than they would like it to be.
Yeah, and that's a circumstance, you're right, where you want it to be a lower value, but that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely know a lot of people who have basically said, I can't believe that this property was valued at this amount of money, or this business was valued at this amount of money. And, realistically, it's just, these are valuation methods. And if you own a business, you own multiple homes, you own investment properties, then of course, well, I mean, a trust is just a necessary part of life.
Yeah, if you even own one piece of property and it's just your residence, I really do advise people to get a living trust in place. It's not that hard to do, and it's really the best thing. It's such a gift that you can give to your family. It's the difference between something happening to you and your loved ones having no clue what to do, and then having to go through this long and arduous court process and having a very organized binder and the number of an attorney to call where everything's handled at time, and they can focus on grieving and taking care of themselves and not having to go through a court process that's
right.
going to take a long time and cost a lot of money.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is just really important. Trusts are very important, and also, LLCs, corporate entities. If you're thinking about becoming a real estate investor, or you want to be a real estate investor, or you want to become any type of sort of serious investor, whatever you're investing in, then corporate entities really have good benefits for ensuring that you can protect your assets, protect yourself, and also get a lot of tax advantages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You want your living trust, you want your LLC for your investments, you want your S corporation for your operational business. And if you have that all set up properly, then you're doing pretty good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we did get a couple of viewer questions. I cherry picked a couple of them. And so we will be answering those when we come back to our next segment.
Alrighty.
Okay, first question. Well, I'll pick this as the first question because it's related to what we were just talking about. Does a living trust have to have the name of the person making the trust?
So I'm gonna take this question to. I believe maybe what this person is asking is, can you get privacy protection through creating a living trust? And the name of the living trust does not have to have the name of the person who's creating it, which is called the grantor. That's it does not have to have the name of the grantor or the grantors in it. It can have any name at all. But that in and of itself is not going to provide any privacy protection in terms of owning property in a standard revocable living trust if that person is wanting to be the trustee of their trust. And most people do want to be the trustee of their own trust because there's really no reason to have somebody else and to hand over that responsibility to someone else while you're able to do so. That would be like, having somebody that's managing your entire life and all your property and all your financial affairs when you would want to do that yourself. So if you're going to be the trustee of your trust, which most people are, then your name is still going to be on the title to everything, and it's not going to provide any type of privacy protection there. There are a special type of trust that can provide privacy protection. They're not all that common in California, to be honest. They're often referred to as land trusts or title holding trusts, and they have their purpose. It's still a revocable living trust, but it's a special type of revocable living trust that does provide that added benefit of privacy protection. And sometimes it makes sense for a real estate owner to own their property in one of these land trusts or title holding trusts. There's not really that many attorneys that actually do them in California. I think they're just, like I said, they're just not very common. And you might even call up an attorney and they might say, oh, we don't have those in California. Well, it's true, we don't have them by statute in California. There are other states that have what's called a land trust or a title holding trust that's created by statute. Illinois is one, Florida is another. But they are possible to create in California, and they're just not by statute. But again, it's a special type of trust. You do need to have a nominee trustee who's not you, who is going to serve as the trustee of that trust. It cannot be an LLC that you create yourself, because in California, an entity cannot be the trustee of a trust unless it's licensed as a trust company. So it has to be either a person, a third party, or a trust company, which can be very expensive to have a trust company serving as your trustee. Or the only other exception is that the attorney who created the trust that law firm can serve as the trustee. So those are your options for a land trust, and that is the way that you would be able to get privacy. But a standard revocable living trust that you might create for your estate planning purposes is not going to provide that privacy.
Okay. So while you can put whatever name you want on the trust, you can say the Fireman's Rescue Trust, yes, or whatever, as a revocable living trust. It's going to name you, Alanna Pearl, as trustee of the Fireman's Rescue Trust while you're alive, and then afterwards there will be another trustee.
Exactly right. Yeah. And the other thing about that is when people tell me that they want to create a land trust to get some privacy protection, you have to think about the fact that if you own the property in your own name and then there's a mortgage in your name, which is also easy to determine, you can, from public records, you can find out if there's a mortgage and who's the person who's responsible on that mortgage, and then you transfer it to the title holding trust. You're not really fooling anybody, Yes, okay, now the most recent deed is going to have this other trust with this other trustee, but you're still on the mortgage. You were the last person that owned it. it wasn't sold. You can tell from the records that it wasn't sold, that it was just transferred, because if it was sold, there would be a transfer tax that would be paid, and that would be on the face of the deed. So, it's not really going to provide you with all that much privacy protection. If you're really, really concerned about this, then the best way is to, from the very beginning, when you're acquiring the property, to take title in this privacy trust, in this title holding trust, so that your name is never anywhere in the chain of title, in the history of the title. And you're also going to want to make sure that any mortgage is taken out by the trust, which it may be hard to find a mortgage company that would be willing to lend to this title holding trust instead of you personally. So those are some things to think about.
Awesome. I mean, you kind of addressed this question, but nonetheless, I will pop it on there because this can only be, it is so important to reiterate. Why should I hire a lawyer if I can get a cheap trust made with my accountant?
I think you meant a cheap LLC made with your accountant.
So yes, I can get a cheap LLC made with my accountant. Sorry.
Having your accountant file your LLC is pretty much the same thing as having LegalZoom file your LLC. They're not lawyers. They're not going to give you any legal advice whatsoever. And accountants are not thinking about the liability issues of an LLC, the maintenance requirements. Maybe a very, very good accountant might be, but I've never seen so far a client who came to me that had an LLC created by their accountant that was doing it right. I'll put it that way, because the accountant knows to file the paperwork with the Secretary of State. They might have some template operating agreement that they give you to create. They're going to say, by the way, I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. You should have this looked over by an attorney, because that they're going to do that for their own CYA protection. And you're not getting, for all the reasons we talked about earlier in the podcast, in the show, about what you need to do to properly maintain your LLC. You're not going to get that advice and guidance from your accountant. You're going to need an attorney to assist with that. So, it's perfectly fine if you want to have your accountant file the paperwork with the Secretary of State on your behalf, but I still then would recommend you have a consultation with an attorney, if nothing else, just to get educated on what to do from there on an annual basis to make sure that this LLC actually works properly.
Yeah, I think that's really, I don't know, that cannot be overemphasized, the importance of having attorneys involved in things that are legal.
Right. Yeah. So I would say, I wouldn't try and change my own oil. Could I figure it out? I probably could, but I don't want to. I'd rather go to, somebody who knows what they're doing and have them do it properly.
Right.
And there's lots of different examples of that. If you're going to have something done that's a legal issue, or you're going to be creating a legal entity, you probably want to have somebody who knows what they're doing do that for you, rather than somebody who really, that's not their primary area of expertise.
Right. And also, like, I always joke that, like, the difference between a doctor and a lawyer is that doctors know how to kill you and lawyers know how to make you wish you were dead. And there is really some truth to that. Like, I wouldn't do my own open heart surgery. I would not do my own, like, psychoanalysis. I wouldn't do my own appendectomy.
I wouldn't dye my own hair. I'm going to go to my really awesome hairstylist for that.
Yeah. So getting lawyers to do the things that they are good at doing is really important. Not making you wish you were dead, but, like, they know the things that people can do that will make you wish you were dead, and they can help you avoid those things. And it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. The best value of a lawyer is really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's not the legal documents, because in this day and age, you actually can find legal documents pretty much anywhere. You're going to be able to find an operating agreement online. Whether or not it's the right one for you, I don't know, but that's not the value. The value of having an attorney is having a trusted advisor who knows what they're doing. They think like a lawyer. They can spot issues that I guarantee you're just not going to see. And it's all attorney-client privileged. So, that's one of the most sacred things about the relationship with an attorney is that everything that you say to them is confidential. It cannot be revealed to anybody, and you can speak freely, and you're really going to get the advice that you need. And that's really the value of having a lawyer on board on your team. It's not just getting some legal documents put in place for you.
Yeah, and it is really. I mean, this isn't this. I'm sure it comes up in real estate and certain other areas, but like especially in criminal law, if you are in a certain business where you are sort of running or towing the line of criminal activity, right? You can go to your criminal lawyer and say, "Hey, I'm planning on doing this. What would be the legal outcomes if I do this? Will I end up in jail?" And your lawyer can't turn around and tell anybody else.
Yes, that is one example of the value of the client privilege. And with my clients, I call myself a personal family lawyer, and that's because I don't just put an LLC in place or create a living trust and then say, "Very nice to know you. Good luck to you." My clients know that I'm now on their team. I'm one of their advisors. And I say, I don't know when and I don't know why, but I guarantee there's going to be something coming up at some point where you're going to be very happy that you already have a relationship with me, that you already have a lawyer that you can call up and get advice on this issue. And whether or not it's something that I do, I'm going to be their first advisor to really help think these issues through, to get them to the right advisor, or maybe it is something that I can help with. So I can't. You are right that you really can't overemphasize the value of having a trusted legal advisor
Yeah,
as one of your advisors for your life and business.
absolutely. And I will ask this question last. I don't know if it would require the most complex answer, but I'm somebody with very little business experience. What legal things should I do to prepare to own real estate?
I think all the things we talked about today would be a really good start. You're going to want to get your trust set up. You're going to want to do an analysis of whether it makes sense to own real estate in an LLC or not. If it's just your residential property, probably don't need to have an LLC. If you're trying to invest in your first property for, you want to acquire a portfolio of real estate investment properties and become a landlord, then it probably does make sense to own it through an LLC. You're going to want to make sure that you have a good accountant on your team, a good lawyer on your team, that you have the right insurance. You want to have a good insurance agent that you really trust. You want to make sure that you understand how to keep good books and records and to do your tax returns. And these are all things that you're going to want to put together a team of people, of advisors that can really help guide you through this process, because we shouldn't go it alone. We're not meant to go it alone. And the best thing you can do if you want to become a real estate investor or start a business is make sure you have people on your team that can serve you in all of these different areas to make sure that you're set up properly and that you're going to create the foundation for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you plan on owning real estate, you should probably get either a real estate lawyer, which I have been told they're hard to find. I didn't realize that because I know a ton of them, but
You
and I
are
am, and I am one, which is probably why I know a lot of them. But every time I get calls from clients, they're like, "It's so hard to find a real estate lawyer," and I'm like, "Okay, well,
mm-hmm.
here I am."
Right here on this screen, you have a real estate lawyer and you have a business and estate planning lawyer. So we're going to be able to cover a lot of the issues that will come up for you between the two of us.
Yes, and actually, I think that's a really great segue. If people want to contact you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Sure. So my law firm is Conscious Legal. So if you Google Conscious Legal, you will find me, my website. You can contact me through my website. You can schedule a 15-minute intro call through my website. I'm Alanna Pearl. So if you Google Alanna Pearl attorney, you're going to find me. That's probably the best way. And I think probably going to my website is the easiest way to find me. Conscious Legal. There we go. And the website is consciouslegal.law. A lot of people get that wrong because it's not .com. It's www.consciouslegal.law. Looks like Frantz putting that up.
Thank you so much, Alanna. Yes, I'm putting that up on the stream.
There we go. Consciouslegal.law. I had to learn how to spell when I decided to name my firm Conscious Legal.
Yeah, I know. I think that's like an additional added benefit of the name of your law firm. Like it has taught you how to spell one of the most commonly misspelled words.
Exactly right. You're right there.
Well, Alanna, I want to really thank you for coming with us or coming on the show with us today. You provided a lot of really great information, and you did it while talking in a very like calm, slow voice that was easy to follow, which I think everybody would really appreciate. I certainly appreciated it. So I really appreciate your time, and I will be here next week with another real estate pro. Bye-bye.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much, Frantz. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.